This is Dr. Todd Galvin. He's here to talk about Wilson's disease. So, Dr. Galvin, what is pretty much the basics behind Wilson's disease? What are like the symptoms?
Well, Wilson's disease, first of all, is a problem with storage of copper in the human body. Normally the liver takes copper and puts it in a protein called ceruloplasmin, which then carries it to the kidneys and it's excreted.
Alright, Brett.
Okay. So, what could be a list of descriptions of the characteristics or symptoms of Wilson's disease?
Well, Wilson's disease can affect any organ in the body because what happens is instead of the copper being excreted out, it builds up in the body, so it deposits everywhere. The two organs that we most commonly see symptoms from are the liver and the brain. In the liver, you can see as little as just what are called abnormal liver function tests, showing that there's some chronic ongoing damage with the liver, all the way to a fulminant liver failure. And in deposition in the brain, it can present, and people can have symptoms of change in mental function. They can have Parkinson-type features. They can not be able to walk well. And they actually have something called rhesus sardonicus, which is uncontrolled grinning.
Okay, Drew.
Alright, so what might cause the basics of Wilson's disease?
Well, Wilson's disease is a genetic disease, and it's what's called an autosomal recessive disease. And basically what that means is you inherit a gene from your parents, one from each parent, and if you have two recessive genes, then you'll get the disease. If you have a normal dominant gene and the abnormal recessive gene, you won't have the disease. So it's not very common because of that.
Yes, we found out, if this is true, that it affects around 1 in every 30,000 people. Is that about right?
40,000.
It's very,
40,000.
very uncommon.
Alright.
Mm-hmm.
So what's like the specific functions as like the liver's normal function? How would that be affected from Wilson's disease?
Well, the liver is, other than the brain, it's probably the most important organ in the body because it makes all these proteins. As an example, all the food that you eat, it has to be absorbed into the liver and repackaged and sent to different tissues. It makes a lot of proteins that are involved in carrying antibodies. It's an incredibly important organ system. It has multiple functions.
Yes, and how would that be affected from Wilson's disease with the copper buildup?
Right, the copper buildup is, imagine just you're dumping tons of copper in the liver cells. The liver cells can't melt, they don't function.
Alright.
Okay. Kurt, what is a description of the structures and functions that are affected? Like, all the structures.
Like what are the physical characteristics of your body that will be affected from Wilson's disease?
Well, I think one issue is that your body has a normal way of dealing with copper. And Wilson's disease, it can't do that, so it's not excreted. And that's basically the gene to put the copper in the ceruloplasmin is defective. So that little chemical interaction doesn't happen, so it builds up in your system. And then the results of that are, as we already talked about, are liver damage and what that can do in neurological damage.
But what would be physical changes? Like we researched some that your skin will turn a yellow.
You can have copper by itself tends to have a bluish color, or depending on what it's chemically connected to, it can have a yellowish color. So there's something called Kaiser-Fleischer rings, which are seen on the cornea, and it's a bluish color. It has to be. You have to use something called slit lamp ophthalmoscope to see that.
Okay. And today, in present day, are there any current treatments to treat
Right, there's
Wilson's
some current
disease?
treatments. They're basically something, they're called chelating agents. They're medicines that kind of go in and grab, the copper kind of fits right into them, and then your body excretes that chelating agent and sort of gets rid of it. Penicillamine is the one that's been used the most, and there's some newer ones.
Okay.
Now, is there any surgical options to surgically remove some excess copper from the liver exactly, or no?
No, because you have to remember it's everywhere. We talk about the liver and the brain, but it's in all other tissues. But to make the diagnosis is very difficult because a lot of the tests are not always positive, and sort of the gold standard for making the diagnosis is a liver biopsy.
And when would you first look for it, for like they could have Wilson's disease? If like say you started investigating the liver, they had some liver disease, but you tested for that and that was a fail. Would you start looking at it, or when?
Normally, in my setting in primary care, it's when you have people have abnormal liver function tests on routine blood work, and you don't have a reasonable explanation for that. So then you would go to the second level and order these tests, and that's when I would look for it.
All right.
Okay, so it's a series of different tests that, like, make sure you have the Wilson's disease.
Right, but what's key is except for the liver biopsy and the genetic testing if you have the gene, all the other tests that we use, like checking for low ceruloplasmin levels, they're not 100%. So you can't, you just can't rely on that totally.
Now, of the methods, are there any methods of prevention for this, or is it just genetics,
It's
depending on your
genetic.
genetics?
It's genetic.
So yeah, it just depends on your genetics.
Right.
Yep. All right. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Galvin. Thank you very much.
Thank you
You're
for
welcome.
stopping in.